Well, turning now to politics, President Trump is keeping up his attacks on the Justice Department's Russia investigation. On Friday, he questioned the integrity of his own Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who is supervising the case. This comes amid new talk that the Deputy AG may recuse himself, and here's why. Rosenstein would be called as a witness in the case because of his involvement in the firing of FBI Director James Comey. Joining me now to break all this down, Zerlina Maxwell and Kevin Sheridan. Kevin is a Republican strategist and former VP Communications Director for the 2012 Romney-Ryan campaign, and Zerlina, a Democratic strategist and Director of Progressive Programming for SiriusXM. Kevin, I want to start with you first, if I may. Rosenstein appears to be facing this mounting pressure to step aside from the Russia case, since he obviously, as I mentioned, could be called as a witness. If he does, who takes over? What are the political consequences?
Well, it would fall to the number 3 in charge at the Justice Department, and that's Rachel Brand. She's the Associate Attorney General. She's an experienced lawyer herself. She's a Harvard-educated former law clerk of Anthony Kennedy. So certainly it'd be in good hands. You could make an argument it could go to the Solicitor General as well. He's not in place yet, though, just nominated. So it's probably the number 3 at the Justice Department. Politically speaking, though, I think if you step back from this, you really have to look at this special prosecutor has been given incredible powers, state police powers, and the Justice Department is under its own cloud now. They have got to run this thing by the book. They've got a bunch of very tough prosecutors that they've brought on board. They've got to assure the American people when this process is all over that this wasn't a politically motivated or personally motivated, because Bob Mueller obviously is very close with James Comey, the star witness now, who's sort of alleging obstruction of justice. If they don't assure the American people that they come up with some charge that they did all the work on this, I think you're going to rip this country apart. Donald Trump is the duly elected president of the United States, and you can't charge the president with winning an election, for just winning an election. He won fair and square. They've got to come up with something that really is by the book, and it's got to be a compelling legal case, and the American people are going to have to buy it.
Zerlina, Kevin was talking about ripping this country apart. There's some talk that the president might, in fact, remove special counsel Robert Mueller in this. It was met by dismay on both sides. How do you see Democrats taking this if that, in fact, goes down that way?
I think it would be a constitutional crisis if he went as far as firing the special prosecutor. We're in this position because he fired the FBI director who was investigating him, also an unprecedented move. And I think it's clear. I do agree with Kevin that the investigation needs to go on. We need to get to the bottom of not only whether or not there was collusion, but how Russia was able to hack into our election, perhaps impacting voter rolls and getting into state databases. Now, nobody is alleging that they changed the number of votes that went to either candidate, but certainly the propaganda and fake news that was spread in targeted swing states is something that Mueller is really looking at, and certainly the House Intelligence Committee asking for the director from the Trump campaign to testify is also evidence that we're moving closer to getting to the bottom of this.
Kevin, when you talk about the president's tweets, do you worry that he's putting himself in any sort of legal jeopardy? Is there potential for that?
Well, he hasn't yet, but you could certainly make that case that, look, he should stop tweeting about this case. It's just going to get him in trouble. It can't help him. Bill Clinton, appointed a very experienced legal defense team. He had very top-notch lawyers and communicators to attack the special prosecutor and to make Ken Starr the issue instead of, whether or not he lied to a grand jury, which he clearly did, and that was an actual obstruction of justice. But he got away with that because he was smart, and he was able to convince enough of the Senate to not convict him of the impeachment charges. So he got away with it. But Donald Trump's got to be careful because he's kind of a one-man band here, and he should entrust his counselors to do that job for him, and he should just step aside from it, focus on his agenda, get back to what the American people actually elected him for. It's not to get in fights with the Justice Department or the special prosecutor.
Zerlina, you mentioned earlier about Russia, the focus on the elections. The Senate almost unanimously voted to put in place sanctions. It'll go now to the House. The White House, some members in the White House, including Secretary of State Tillerson, has said these sanctions are a bit too harsh. How do you see this playing out?
I think that it's important for the Congress to actually do something, because it's clear that the Trump White House is not willing to punish Russia for what they did in our election. He has said nothing critical of Vladimir Putin or Russia up to this point. And so it's the role of Congress now, because the president is unwilling. And so I hope that the House passes the sanctions just as the Senate did, because it's important for us as a nation to respond to an attack on really the core of our democracy. This is no small matter, and it's not really about relitigating the election. It's about preventing an attack on the next election.
There's been so much focus on Russia, Kevin, but I want to ask you about the Senate. GOP is working sort of behind closed doors to draft a replacement health care bill. The lawmakers are facing criticism for not holding public hearings on it yet. What do you make of this debate, Kevin?
Well, they're ultimately going to be judged on their work product, and that's a process criticism, and Democrats certainly got that when they passed Obamacare on Christmas Eve of 2009, and no one saw the bill, no one knew it was in it, and Nancy Pelosi said we're going to have to pass it.
That's not true. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that's not true. There was over a year of public hearings, including a day-long hearing where Eric Cantor, as you remember, had 3 big binders that the bill was in, and that was a public hearing allowing Americans to see the process. The process was transparent. Yes, it passed on Christmas Eve, but it was over a year before we even got to that point.
You know, Kevin, that's some of the criticism, that this has sort of been, hastily organized and thrown together without enough time. You know, healthcare is very complicated. It takes time. It took the Obama administration almost 2 years. So what do you make of the criticism that this is kind of being put together behind closed doors?
Well, I get the criticism either, that they're either going to get criticized for going too fast or too slow. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's what they come up with that will.
So how do they win, Kevin? How do Republicans win on health care?
Well, the reason why Americans are so upset with the health care system that they've got is that premiums have skyrocketed. Coverage is bad. The plans are bad. Nobody wants the plans that they're offered. Coverage is awful in many counties. People have one plan.
And everyone seems to agree by that, but we don't have anything coming from Capitol Hill about how to fix it.
Sure we do. We've got a plan that the House just passed. The Senate's going to come up with what they, similar, but probably would put their own brand on it. But look, it's going to bring in market-driven fixes to a broken market right now. The individual market is very screwed up. If anybody that's on Obamacare knows this, that you get a bronze plan, you can't do anything with it. You get $6,000, $8,000 deductibles. You're paying $400, $900 a month in some places. It's just not coverage that's usable. So it's not a good system now. Republicans they're going to be judged on what they come up with, what ultimately passes, and if it actually makes Americans' lives better. Yeah. That's what they have to focus on.
I want to ask you guys both about the call of unity that we've seen the past week after the shooting at the baseball field. Do either of you believe that we're going to now see a toning down of rhetoric on both sides? Zerlina?
I do think so. I mean, I think that certainly the rhetoric that was, prominent during the campaign, Donald Trump essentially inciting acts of violence at his own rallies, that was troubling then, and it's still troubling. And I think that everybody can tone it down just a little bit, because it's really about the issues. It's not about personality or whether or not you like someone. But I do have to say that the resistance and the opposition to Donald Trump is really about policies and the impact of what his policy decisions and what Republicans are doing in Congress that actually impacts people's lives. So whether or not that's breaking up families by deporting people who have been here in America their entire lives since their childhood, or taking away women's reproductive health care services. So while we're critiquing Obamacare, we have to keep in mind that the health insurance system before Obamacare was terrible. And I've been on a bronze plan under Obamacare, and as a woman, preventative health care was covered. And so when I needed to go to the doctor, as many women do every 6 months, right, to take care of ourselves and to get that checkup, that was included in my bronze health care plan under Obamacare. That was not the case before Obamacare.
Kevin, I want to get back to the shooting here. The fact that you just heard so many calls of unity. It was such an emotional week for this country, seeing this shooting take place. Do you think this will affect the mood on Capitol Hill and the ability for Republicans and Democrats to cross the aisle?
Well, it was a pretty good week for unity. I think what we really need, though, is a unified agreement that we need to make this more about policy discussions and not about the personal vitriol and not about the end of the world. Every policy is going to end the world. It's going to take away your this or take away that, and they're going to kill, 23 million Americans are going to be killed. This will put lives at risk. We've got to stop with that because people are taking this stuff more seriously than I think the people that are saying it. And, the people on the fringes who buy this stuff, you're whipping up some real hate out there. And I think both sides need to work on this, and hopefully this is the moment that happens.
All right. From your lips to God's ears, Kevin Sheridan and Zerlina Maxwell, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.